Our economy is based on consumption. So we consume natural resources and we consume energy to make things, move things, transport things, store things. So if we're growing the economy, more activity, more consumption, we're creating more pollution, more greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, and the planet is changing more and more into a place that will become really uninhabitable. So there's got to be some massive structural transformations to our entire global economy. An economy is basically just people moving around trading goods and services. Businesses are made up of people doing that as well. And all our goods and services require the natural world. We can't breathe and trade our services without fresh air and water and all that kind of stuff. So sustainability for us is all those things.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Waste to Wealth. Today I'm joined by Nick. Nick, why don't you give us the TLDR on who you are and what you're up to?
Sure, Charlie, thanks for having me. The TLDR, well, I'll go back to early years. Timaru lad, I grew up in Timaru in South Canterbury and then went to Otago University and sort of followed my love of sports really. And I did a PE degree there. I absolutely loved it. And as often people who went to Otago University say, they also did the life degree. And so I've had a great time there, but came out of that not really knowing what I was going to do. Which is probably quite common as well, I think, with people who leave university, especially with PE degrees. I had a real passion for sports, as I said, and I really wanted to kind of work in that kind of strength and conditioning, professional sports sort of realm. But there was not many job opportunities in those days. It would have been 2005-ish.
It's changed quite a bit now, obviously.
Yeah. A lot more professional teams and stuff
yeah.
now. Back then there might have been, I don't know, half a dozen to 10 professional sort of teams around, you know, that would have had any kind of full-time strength and conditioning coach. So, and no one really moved on from those roles. Anyway, I didn't do that. I ended up working in fitness and was a personal trainer at Les Mills for 3 years and then went over to London and I've got a job at a fancy Pilates studio in Notting Hill.
Okay.
It's a pretty swanky part of London, for those who don't know, and learnt how to teach reformer Pilates. It's on one of those machines, and enjoyed that. It was teaching lots of extremely wealthy and some famous people as well, which was fun for time. Dropping some names with friends and stuff, but found I wanted to go out my own, and so left that job and started my own. Well, just working for myself, and so got myself a Vespa scooter and buzzed around London, going to see my clients, and some meeting them in their homes, some in their offices, some in the parks. Also set up a sort of outdoor training program as well, sort of trying to follow that CrossFit sort of buzz, that kind of high intensity training. Did it outdoors with another lady and sort of set that up. And then time came to leave London, 4.5 years there, and went to the Brazil World Cup in 2014, the Football World Cup. And had an amazing time in Brazil, as you can probably imagine, and then spent the next 5 months after that backpacking through Central America. Came back here after that, broke and without a job, and through having dinner with an old family friend, she told me about the job she'd just taken working for a compostable packaging company. And I thought that was amazing. I'd just been through Central and South America, as I said, and for those who haven't been there, there's some incredible pollution, right? Like just heartbreaking, plastics all over the beaches and all through the bushes. And I remember being on a bus with the locals, and this woman just threw this plastic bag out the window. So had that kind of experience, and then this compostable packaging. I thought, oh my God, that's the solution. And so met the guy who founded that. It was only a year old at the time, and he offered me a job and a car and a phone and a laptop. And I was like, sweet, I need all of that. And so I thought, let's give it a go. Rather than going back into the fitness world, I kind of felt like I'd done my time in that. And I thought I'd give this a go and see what happens. And it was just this doorway, Charlie, into sustainability and the circular economy, and I just absolutely loved it. It was all about the solutions and bringing forward innovations and new ideas to sort of solve these big sustainability problems that we've got. And so I was there 2.5 years and made my own role there. I became the sustainability and sales manager, and by the time I left, I think it was 13 thereabouts FTEs there. And then the time came to go out my own, and so went and started Go Well Consulting, and fast forward to now, sort of just turned 8. Go Well Consulting just turned 8 on the 1st of November, and we're a team of 6 now, and we're a sustainability consultancy, so help businesses with strategies around sustainability, or ESG, as some people refer to it, reporting, communicating, measuring their impacts, especially greenhouse gas footprints, help them with their supply chains, and looking at risks of modern slavery and so forth in supply chains, help them with their packaging design, all of these things. Trying really hard to help with the transition to a circular economy. So rather than this linear economy we've got at the moment, where we extract resources, make products, and then chuck them back into the environment in the way of pollution or waste. trying to keep things going round and round and round.
Right.
Yeah, that's probably a good TLDR.
That's a good TLDR, and that was not long, by the way.
Right.
That's a pretty good TLDR for how much content you got in there. So who do you do? Is it mainly larger businesses that you consult to then? Like, because, you know, like, obviously, often in business, the first stage is how do I survive? And then, you know, I have a set of other problems until I eventually get to the problem of, okay, what are we doing here? We have quite a large impact on our environment. How do we improve that? Like, what's the kind of age and stage of your kind of ideal client, I guess?
Yeah, I'll sort of answer it in two parts. And I guess now we are more working with what we'd sort of call medium-sized business, at least in the New Zealand context.
Yeah.
So for us, that's sort of around 20 full-time employees to 200.
Yeah.
We've got some less than that, and
Yeah.
we've got some over that. We've got
Yeah.
a couple around the sort of 2,000 FTE mark. But we sort of say businesses who can't find or can't afford a full-time sustainability manager. And so we're a team of sort of mixed skills within sustainability and sort of play that we call it part-time sustainability
It's like
team.
fractional
or virtual,
Yeah.
CSO kind of chief sustainability officer kind of role. It changed with COVID. I very much have ridden that COVID wave. So was on my own for 3 years. Then COVID came, got through that 2020, and then 2021. There's just all this money flooding into the economy, and including straight from the government. They had some. It was called the Springboard thing. It was through NZTE and helping businesses work on anything from marketing to sales and sustainability. And we really just found this niche of working with sort of purpose-driven SMEs. So working with a lot of founders who were, you know, started their businesses similar reason I did, to try and solve problems and try and do business in a better way. And that was we really were humming through sort of 2022, and then it all started to unravel with the economy. And so those businesses don't have the big pockets, right? So they had to cut off their, you know, external costs and consultants pretty quickly. So we had to adjust, and it wasn't really a pivot so much. It was just reframing and repackaging, I guess, what we were doing to bigger businesses, and so started to target where we are now.
Right.
We went through 23, and that sort of started to turn around. It was at the end of the year, and then last year, 24. It was like the recession caught up with the bigger guys, and then sort of halfway through last year, they started cutting, you know, staff and delaying work and
activities.
Exactly. But yeah, long answer to your question. But now we're really focusing on that. Yeah, those kind of medium-sized businesses who can't afford or can't find their own full-time sustainability.
Cool.
Professional,
And what's the sort of like lead time do you find on there with your, you know, like with these guys, and like how do you guys kind of build up that reputation and actually kind of get a piece of work going?
Yeah, good question. It's got longer. Like, it's definitely something we've noticed with the struggling economy. People are a lot more uncertain and a lot more cautious with their spending. And yeah, back in the day, like I say, 21, 22, it was just super quick, call up. We had a good reputation, especially in that kind of SME space, that purpose-driven SME space. And they heard of us, we sent them a proposal, boom, they were signing on. And it was, you know, we're struggling to keep up and grew the team and all that kind of stuff. Whereas now, yeah, this year's been funny. It started really positive, and we had a couple of our best months ever at the start of this year, and then it's just really dried up again. And yeah, it's a long lead time now, months, you know, and businesses are taking time to think about it. I imagine they're talking to other consultancies as well. I don't know, but I assume they'd be doing a bit of shopping around, and yeah, they're a bit cautious when they do start.
Yeah. Would you say that sustainability as a brand has taken a bit of a hit?
Yeah. Yeah.
Over the last 1 to 2 years, perhaps?
Yeah. It was funny. Actually, not to plug another podcast or anything, but I had a conversation with Simon from MBR on his podcast recently, and he titled it "The End of Woke Capitalism,"
right? And
another way to term it, sustainability. But I said there, and I'll repeat here, like there was definitely a lot of momentum pre-COVID, and a lot of businesses were like, okay, let's do this. We're getting it. Climate change is really serious. It's a massive risk to the entire species on this planet, but to business. And so let's get to work on this. And some really ambitious goals were coming out around reducing emissions and going circular and all these kind of things. And then COVID just turned the world upside down, right? And businesses have been struggling ever since. There's been massive amounts of misinformation and disinformation and mistrust. And we're slowly getting back, I think, some, whether it's reputation or some kind of buy-in back into sustainability, but it's definitely taken a knock for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of, sustainability and ESG got intertwined into, or considered from people's minds as government spending, right? And people's real aversion currently in the zeitgeist of kind of, I guess, the world, the reflexive and mimetic kind of cycles that we go through, would be that governments are kind of untrusted, and ESG, I think, and sustainability goals got kind of attached to is associated with, basically, I think.
Yep.
That's kind of that would be my observation, because prior to COVID, you had, like you said, you had organic and enduring kind of buy-in and progress that was made. And then you obviously had COVID, and then you actually had a doubling down on that because there was so much extra cash flow available in the system. And then you obviously you've got I would say, a bit of a hangover. And then, like you say, from a kind of, if you're not in it and you're just learning about it, a natural or a kind of more prevalent, I guess, skepticism?
Yeah, resistance, skepticism. Yep. Yeah, I think there's a bit of a gap opening up too. I think the businesses we are working with now, what we've also noticed, Charlie, is that the business we are working now get it. We're not trying to sell sustainability to them. They don't need. Right. They understand it. They know it's it's going to get worse before it gets better. They understand the value to their brand, and they've committed to it as a brand anyway. Whereas previously, when 21, 22 in New Zealand, and I imagine it was similar in other parts of the world, but businesses were kind of doing it because government, pulling the stick out and whacking them and saying, hey, you need to do this, and here's these new regulations, here's this new reporting stuff you've got to do. And so they came into, engaging with us kind of reluctantly. There'd be keen beans in the maybe more middle management or lower down kind of within a business, but the bigger decision makers were pretty reluctant. And that's changed now. They're not bothered. They're kind of like, wow, the government's not whacking us, we're not going to really do it. So those kind of laggards have kind of dropped off and just I think they're really putting themselves in a stupid and dangerous position, because they're not building the confidence and the capability and the literacy around this stuff. So when the light does turn back on and people are like, hang about, climate change has got so much worse, what have you done about your emissions? Plastic pollution's got worse, what have you done about that? Blah, 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 blah. They'll be like, quickly, nothing. Consultants come in, and help us out, versus those who are just still sort of plugging away and just doing what they can and doing little bits. They're going to be so far ahead, So I think there is a bit of that kind of divide happening at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, we've had quite a few different episodes around different initiatives around kind of sustainability and kind of natural kind of habitat in natural species, and how you can optimize and use incentives to obviously help improve your kind of general sustainability ambitions, but also then in the case of native bush, being able to monetize that land that actually is kind of hard to monetize perhaps. So it's good when there's a business case, and I think that a lot of purpose-driven founders have ideas around what they want to see in the world, and if the bite is not too big, it's something that where people will take a punt to improve their brand standing and achieve something. And then obviously, like you say, you've got this historical kind of box ticking kind of environment, especially with carbon credits, that became a very big thing very quickly. So the whole solar space became very big and got pretty leveraged pretty quickly around the 2021, 2022 era because of financing was so cheap. So it's a real interesting space. Do you guys focus purely on environmental sustainability, or is it sustainability at a more broad ESG level, which is also kind of a governance side of things, et cetera, et cetera?
Correct. Yeah. So I often have to explain sustainability to people, and we flip and flop between using the term sustainability and ESG, or environmental, social, and governance, because it is those three pillars. It's trying to explain to people and to businesses that it's all connected, right? Like an economy is basically just people moving around trading goods and services, right? And then businesses are made up of people doing that as well. And all our goods and services require the natural world. We can't breathe and trade our services without fresh air and water and all that kind of stuff, and food, and we can't trade goods without natural resources that we extract out of the planet. So trying to make everyone understand that. And I always sort of use the analogy that someone who doesn't know where their next meal is coming from, who lives in extreme poverty and anxiety and stress and all those things, trauma, no doubt as well, they don't care about their emissions. They're not thinking about where that plastic bag's going, or whether they should be trying to eat a bit less meat and dairy. They just trying to get by, and that's a lot of people in this world. So so sustainability for us is all those things. And with businesses, we talk like bringing that into some of their strategies they might do. Like we might talk to them about giving back ideas or any kind of donation strategies they might have. We've personally got a 1% of revenue that we donate every year to split it between 50-50 to charities that we really admire. Also, that might be looking at their staff and the working environment. We do a 9-day fortnight, so every second Friday you have off. We stagger it so the business is always open, but different people. So it's all about that sort of health and well-being stuff, which I guess links a little bit back to my time as a fitness and health professional. You know, stuff about recruiting and retaining really good staff and upskilling and training them. So that's a lot of the social aspect that we bring into the sustainability work and strategies that we do. Yeah, there's still a lot of, it's funny, right, in 2025, that still some people view sustainability as just about the environment. But I think it's definitely a much smaller kind of crowd that still think that now. I think most people are pretty...
Yeah, I think it's now
across the both,
much better understood, for sure. But still something that's early days for a lot of businesses that are still in survival mode, especially in an environment where there's a bit of scarcity, you know, and a bit of, I think, protectionism because of the environment and because of the kind of probably cultural dynamics that exist here. Yeah.
It's and I think also like being empathetic to how tough it is economically at the moment, at least in New Zealand, right? And so I think there's the other thing that sustainability's got going against it is, yes, there's the cost and stuff potentially for it, but also it's big picture thinking and it's complex and it's all interconnected, right? So you sit down with a business leader or whatever and you explain this and they're like, yeah, we get it. I do care and all that, but I'm literally trying to keep the lights on, mate. Like I just need to, stick to my knitting, and we're just going to keep doing what we do until we can kind of get to a place where we can start to think more about this stuff. We don't have the headspace, let alone the resources to kind of think about how we're going to reduce our emissions or how we're going to keep these materials going around the economy or how we're going to make sure our staff are maybe having some more time off. Like, so there's that kind of the brain space and the head space that's needed as well that I think is puts a few people off, which is tough. Sure. We're in an incredible time in human history, right? Without being too dramatic, but we've got these limits to how much we can pollute and damage the planet before it will change. It doesn't give a flying care, watch my language, about us or our economies or our desire for new things or growing our businesses. It's just the natural world, and it just works based on physics and biology and chemistry. And so if we keep putting greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, that keeps trapping heat, that changes the climate, and that stuffs everything, right? And so we're trying to get businesses to understand that and do all these things to, not just reduce emissions, but like I keep saying, things like plastics and inequality and modern slavery, these kind of things. And meanwhile, trying to remain profitable and trying to still grow, and even that is a pretty triggering word for a lot of people in the sustainability space. It's probably another whole conversation another time, Charlie, around growth. But
is that growth of sustainability or growth of business?
Growth of business. That what I say, mainstream kind of thinking that it's all about growing the economy, but our economy is based on consumption. So we consume natural resources and we consume energy to make things, move things, transport things, store things. So if we're growing the economy, more activity, more consumption, we're creating more pollution, more greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, and the planet is changing more and more into a place that will become really uninhabitable. So there's got to be some massive structural transformations to our entire global economy. And that, probably a few people have switched off now from listening to this because it's a lot to take in, right? And people are like, fuck, I care about the planet. Look, we plant a few trees each year and sweet, we're good. And then we'll carry on trying to grow our business, and I get that. I get why people kind of do switch off and do think like that, because it is complex and heavy and challenging.
Well, and also like not intangible, but sometimes not clear the impact, at least straight away.
Yep, you're totally right. Yep.
And I think that it really connects to like basically giving anything enough time to see the results, and actually like big changes don't appear immediately. They appear over like many years, over half a decade, typically.
And the other thing that's really hard here is no business can do it on their own. No industry can do it on their own. No country can do this on their own. A country could lead and really show that to the world. And I think that's where New Zealand's massively missing the mark. But anyway, we work with businesses and they get it. right, they want to make some changes, and we pitch this, what I've just explained to you. We go through a lot more detail and give them a lot more data around all the stuff, so they get some good confidence and knowledge around it, and then we'll help them work through it. And they'll do the baseline stuff, and they'll map their first year of emissions, and they might find a way to bring a few emissions down, or maybe change some electric cars, or reduce a bit of waste going to landfill, and maybe give their staff an extra time off or whatever. They start doing these baseline things. Might take them a couple of years to get that sort of, depending how big and complex they are. And then they got to hit the ceiling, and they go, okay, well, if we're going to bring our emissions down anymore, if we're going to change to this totally reusable packaging, we need supermarkets to change their entire model, or we need the freight companies to completely get off fossil fuels. Like, we can't control that, so it's everyone's got to come together, and that's where the governments kind of need to come in and really sort of lead the change and show the sort of sense of direction, and businesses can all get in behind it, and industries can all get in behind it. But it's very patchy at the moment. There's some great businesses doing some really cool stuff. There's some terrible businesses doing terrible stuff.
Right.
There's some industries doing some really cool things. There's certain players within industries doing certain bits and pieces, and then while there's others undermining that and coming in with dirtier, cheaper options. And so it's just all over the place. It's like we're all in the waka that's just slowly floating to the edge of the waterfall, but we're all paddling in different ways.
Yeah.
And so we're not really getting the momentum we need to push back and get out of the tight spot we're in.
That's going to be interesting. It's really going to be, I guess, interesting to see how the next 5 to 10 years pans out, right? Because I guess it's the zeitgeist that really controls this more systemic, momentum-driven change, right? Like, and you've seen that over the last 5 years, clear as day, around basically zeitgeist and momentum shifting in direction of where people are happily paddling. And obviously it swings because of human nature. It swings like aggressively from extremely positive to extremely negative, depending on, often because of how people feel or because of what they've observed. Especially, I think the problem when you have government incentives and, I guess, really poor governance actually at a business level, often then incentives are what drive outcomes, and those incentives are not always aligned to actual change. They're either aligned to internal politics perhaps, or external incentives that may not be the most efficient way of even deploying change in sustainability, right? So we got, like, I was interviewing a guy the other day who's working on a Web3 solution for basically direct access to grassroots charities. So, if you're a local council, instead of you trying to work out how to deploy the capital, you could pick 3 local charities and then deploy that money directly to them. So cutting the cost of getting the money to the different causes, but then also having a trail of, okay, where did all the capital go?
Yeah, right.
So it's quite a cool initiative. And obviously that's one of the appeals of blockchain and Web3 is the idea of kind of ESG, actually, right? Which is like, how do you broadly get consensus on how you want something to be governed, which is the blockchain and, Web3 and DAOs, I guess. So I think that's quite a cool application, trying to get basically funds from centralized areas to decentralized grassroots initiatives. Because I think we're going from a world of centralization. And this is where you're seeing the shift at a systemic business level is we had 30 to 50 years at least. I mean, really the whole industrial revolution into this kind of consumer driven economy with brands and kind of consumerism at its peak has been centralization of brands, roll-ups, acquisitions, all to conglomeratize business. And then you had government incentives and regional incentives to make change. And it was really kind of, if you think about it, it is to that centralized ecosystem. Now this centralized ecosystem, from my view, is actually being disrupted. And you're seeing it through this kind of general skepticism of centralized organisms or organizations, which is now affecting, can we have a consensus on what we feel about or what we think about ESG or sustainability? And now you don't have a really good, you don't have that same open dialogue because you've had 5 years of people feeling like there is less hope. Which means they care less about, essentially the less empathy, right? You probably have less empathy over periods of time where you where you're in an environment of not feeling like you're thriving or not thriving. But I think this interesting dynamic between centralization big business, a movement towards ESG, and then this kind of became a little bit of a scoring system, perhaps. But where I see the most changes at grassroots levels in sustainability and ESG, if I think ESG more broadly outside of, okay, I'm going to use reusable packaging, but I'm also going to make sure my team are empowered, that my customers are well served and they're not, there aren't any things, that there's good governance for the organization. So I guess coming back to that is the incentives in these big centralized organizations are not the founders. Many cases, it's the incentives are different. Whereas when you get purpose-driven smaller enterprises, you're not going to get a incrementally bigger outcome, but you're probably going to get more small steps forward in the right direction.
So much quicker.
And that's what you need.
Just picking up on that point, that was one of the adjustments we had to make working with those sort of purpose-driven SMEs in the sort of 21, 22, and then a bit before that. But then that change and having to be patient with the bigger governance structures, right? Rather than just sitting there with the founder and going, okay, yep, let's do that, let's go. Okay, sweet. Tomorrow we're onto it. This now has to go up to the C-suite, comes back down with some changes, goes back up, then goes to the board, then comes back down. It's been clear, but this needs to be delayed or this needs to push out. And it's really taken me some time to get to deal with it. I still struggle with it a bit, to be honest, but I guess the hard part of our jobs, people who work in this space, is sort of keeping up to date with the science. And it's so much worse than people comprehend, right? And so the urgency to change is like yesterday, like we're 30 years behind where we need to be, kind of thing. And so you want instantaneous kind of results and people moving and then onto the next business and get them to move and the next one and get them to move. But it's not like that. It's they take their time and they're cautious about this and they're thinking about that and the implications of this. And I get it. I understand why they are. There's some big decisions to make for some of these businesses, but it is it's painfully slow at times with the bigger ones. I'll also just go back and pick up on that kind of decentralization piece, because it's a really important point. Is a lot of problems are from that we've, exactly to your point, we've centralized things, and not just sort of power, but resources and infrastructure. A great example is just recycling, right? So recycling is a volume game. You need a lot of waste. I hate using the word waste. It's just materials in the wrong place, right? It's still got value. Still needs to just go to someone else who can turn it back into something else. But you need a lot of it, and it needs to get to these one places. And so let's just use a classic plastic bottle, just it gets spread all around the entire world, even just the country, New Zealand. You've got to try and collect it all back up, get it to one place that's got the infrastructure and is invested in that infrastructure to then grind it all down and melt it back into new nurdles, little bits of plastics, how it's transported around the world, and then back into the economy, back into some mold, who's making packaging somewhere else or whatever. And that is just so challenging and hard, versus in the natural world, everything is diverse and interconnected. If you go into a forest or whatever, there's so many little different things playing different roles. And so if we sort of were to look to apply that thinking to say packaging or recycling, we could instead have reuse systems. So lots of local systems that go and pick up, like we used to have with, everyone talks about milk bottles back in the day in New Zealand. I remember that growing up. And they go around, they pick them up, they replace them with the full ones, they go and sterilize them and they fill them back up. And it's just done all local, right? Networks of that all around, and that kind of modular approach. And so I think that's a huge part of the future, is going back to that and kind of more replicating what happens in the natural world. There's also a lot of resilience to that. So if one milk,
one node falls over, you might be able to use another nearby node to pick up the slack.
Exactly. And another really great example is solar that we touched on before, and access to energy. And so as we saw in just recently down in Southland with the big storms down there, it was wiped out and they didn't have power. Heaps of people didn't have power. It was a couple of people had solar and everyone's going around there to charge their phones and be able to communicate. Communication towers were out as well, I think, for a lot of people. And same happened in Hawke's Bay. And I know you interviewed Dave Insall, as we talked about, and who experienced it very personally. And they, again, the substation blew out from being flooded and thousands of people without power. Now, instead, you have a network of local sort of microgrids with all these people with solar panels on their roof connecting into each other. You are much more resilient to the extreme weather. That is coming. The climate is going to get so much worse, and we're going to get so many more of these extreme weather events, that we really need to be thinking about how we're going to prepare for it. And that, again, that decentralized work, grassroots, community driven and owned and operated sort of stuff, I think is a big part of a resilient future, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shift from where we thought we were going for a very long time. So it's going to be interesting to see that unfold back. And we are seeing it. Like, I'm seeing it in investing, of course. People are voting with their dollars out of fiat currency, right? Which is a very obvious trend that seems to be right before us, where, you know, outside of kind of, I guess, saying, okay, is speculating on these different assets right or wrong? It's what is happening? And it's like, okay, well, you know, all these people are voting with their dollars and basically saying, hey, I don't want to engage in this system, so I'm voting by converting it into something else.
Yeah.
Whether that be equities, whether that be precious metals, whether that be Bitcoin. Ultimately, it is a speculation of, I don't like the current system, therefore I'm voting to change it, or I feel either greed or fear around what it means to hold that currency. And that currency really represents the faith and belief in the current economic system, which is driven by debt and driven by the banking system. And that banking system is now being aggressively attacked by decentralized systems, new attempts to create power dynamics in the commodity market through things like BRICS, people speculating on gold, etc., etc. So it is...
Yeah, a lot of change going on.
It is going on.
I really want to just pick up that point you made around that kind of consumer power, because I think it's something that we've forgotten a bit in this whole cost of living crisis that we keep getting told about all the time, which I think is becoming a bit of an excuse these days. But anyway, people have got so much power with where they spend their dollar and where they invest their dollar, you know, really bring it back to the work you do. And so businesses are so desperate for the consumer dollar right now. The power is even higher, right? So consumers can really make a difference by choosing to go with this business who is doing these great things around ESG and sustainability versus this one that doesn't give a flying, you know, couldn't care less. And so trying to just really reinstall that, because I think that kind of power and the consumer power, that mindful consumer kind of thing, was again quite prevalent pre-COVID and maybe the first couple of years post-COVID. It's kind of really fallen away with this whole cost of living thing. It's all about cheap, save money. And so the consumer can really have a massive impact, and choosing to, you know, support that kind of smaller local business rather than and know that they're directly paying to someone's wages right in their community versus someone in a faraway land who probably working in, you know, or highly likely they're working in, you know, questionable conditions and all that kind of stuff. So that thing around where you choose your dollar to spend your dollar, you know, what's the saying? Every dollar you spend is a vote on the world you want to live in. So it's a really critical thing to try and get back into consumers' minds and picking back up on the investment piece. So where you choose to put your KiwiSaver, where you choose to invest your other investments is massive. And there's more and more information out there for people to look into it. And it doesn't take much, you know, just one night at home, half an hour kind of research, looking into some things. I'll do a big shout out for Mindful Money, who do an amazing work in the charity that do a lot. And you can go and check your KiwiSaver and who you're invested in. Being a sustainability consultant wouldn't surprise you. You've got an electric bike, electric car. I've cut a lot of meat out of my diet and dairy, all these things, single-use plastics. And then I found out that my KiwiSaver at the time was invested in fossil fuels. And I was like, holy shit. Like, that is multiple times the impact that I'm doing in my personal life. I'm trying so hard here, yet these dollars that I've just put away over here will be having a far bigger impact on the future of my world and my child's world than what I'm doing here. So I guess another shout out for people to go and do that research and check into where your investments are and get away from this thinking that investing in sustainable or ethical or, you know, ESG based businesses is bad for a return. Like it drives me a bit nuts. Like, it's not by any means black and white, but if you have got as a business, you're sorted around ESG, you know your impacts, you know your risks, you've got, you know, great culture internally, people like working for you, they're driven by a bigger purpose. That is a much better business than someone that is not doing any of that, right? And doesn't know about their exposure to the risks. They don't know, you know, the impacts climate's going to have on their supply chain, all these kind of things. So these businesses that are focusing on ESG and invest in those, because they're going to do a lot better over the long term than the ones that aren't, right? So, look, I'm no financial advisor. You're an investor. You know much more about this than I do. But I guess my call out is to empower investors with the impact they can have there on the future of this planet and our future economy, and do a little bit of research into it. And there's some great businesses out there, investors and like the likes of the charity that I've already said, Mindful Money, that give you that information. It's a hugely powerful step you can take in terms of the shape of the future we're creating.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, to your point, like, I guess, you know, a KiwiSaver is just a group of assets. That's all a KiwiSaver fund is. It's a trust that owns a bunch of assets, and sometimes when it has a tag on it, it's got a title or a description of what it is. You do still have to look inside the tin and see, or look at the ingredients, because the ingredients are really what it is, not what it says potentially. And then, you know, if I go to more of a market observation around like the recent, I guess you'd say, kind of boom and bust of ESG investments, because there has been one over the last 5 years, would be that unfortunately whenever you get an exciting new investment opportunity, there is typically inefficient allocation of capital, which leads to perhaps more speculation and potentially a situation where the price discovery is wrong or changes in a moment. And I would say that's what you did see with kind of packaged ESG funds, right? Because on one hand, they've got like a tag on it, a theme on it, but you do have to still look inside it. But then what happens is that, you know, you're not actually investing in 10 great businesses that you understand and know that they're sustainable and have done a really good check on, do they fit your moral compass? And, you know, Dave, who was on the podcast, Dave Insel, he has a very cool investment strategy he's employed for himself personally for his public equities. And to keep it the most simple, I'd say from an ESG perspective, he's killing it, because remember, he's obviously rating his own ESG kind of approach, because he's got essentially a small number of assets, you know, a couple dozen assets, and that's his portfolio. But, you know, when you're an investor trying to assess the ESG impact you're having, obviously it's easier from an operational and administrational perspective to know 12 companies really well and know if they're actually doing what they're, you know, doing the ESG kind of path that you would like, versus actually something that's labeled ESG or sustainable energy or renewable energy ETF, right? That would be a common one, would be a renewable energy ETF or something. So there's the market perspective of, you know, when things get exciting, you get price kind of dislocation or price insensitivity. And then obviously when you've got any type of fund that has a title of some description, it is always good to look from a first principles perspective under the hood into it.
Totally.
And obviously that's a really cool thing with Acuity, with the strategy builder, is you could take that ETF and then actually rip out all the parts that you didn't want.
Yeah, cool.
Or you could create your own strategy that had. And, you know, realistically, the more you do, like the more you're holding, the more you're putting in, the more complex you get with any strategy in life. And you'll know this with what you're doing, helping businesses implement better sustainability and ESG policy strategies, etc., is that the more you try and do, the harder it is to maintain. So there's cool ways you can basically invest without just picking an ETF, because you can look inside the ETFs and own the underlying assets. It's a very efficient way to do it. It's probably the most, and if it's the most efficient, it's probably got the least waste. So from a consumer perspective and how that impacts negatively, probably better. It's actually in a way much nicer because you get that governance side. If you own 30 companies, for example, you actually get an impact in those companies by being a direct shareholder, because you get to vote on matters. And that's important in ESG. That's actually probably something that's completely overlooked, is actually how we govern and operate and think about how businesses progress as a shareholder is ESG innately.
And we've seen those examples of investment activism, right? There's some examples around the world.
Activist investors are supposed to go in and be a kind of check on the market, a check on those management teams. And just like in essence, short sellers are playing a role in the market, because what they're doing is they're checking the market for fraud, they're checking the market for excess speculation, and they're providing a purpose. You know, if you had no activist investors and you had no short sellers in the market, you wouldn't have a functioning market with real price discovery. And the problem that we've now got with over-indexing is that we are centralizing the power of that governance piece to the BlackRocks and the Vanguards of the world naturally.
Yes.
We're actually saying, I don't care. I just care that I don't care about the price. I just care about this index. I care currently, you know, I care about the S&P 500 because it's performing the best.
Yeah.
So I don't care about what price I get for that index because I'm a passive index or I'm an ETF. And you have to think about that too, right? Is like, okay, well, I'm going to use this low cost KiwiSaver provider in New Zealand because they have these aspects that they adhere to, right? They are calling out that they are sustainable or low cost or passive. But then if you look under the hood, are they really passive? You know, what's the distribution rate from, you know, of all the fees to salaries?
Yeah, right.
What is it holding underlying? Is the company that they're using to invest through, or the, you know, like if it is an ETF, is that ETF provider or that, you know, that Vanguard or the BlackRock, is that aligned to how I would like to invest? So I guess that kind of opens up a lot of questions and a lot of ambiguity. And do I really know what I'm investing in? And I think a lot of the kind of struggles around financial products in general, especially in Australia and New Zealand, is that typically you don't directly pay for them. So there's a myriad of conflicts that exist. And two, it's, you know, it's an industry that's been, I'll leave it to the professionals. We know best. Don't look under the hood. You're good.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think that there's now been a huge movement around the whole decentralization that is saying, hey, learn about what you're doing. Vote with your dollars. You know, you look at $130 billion in Australian banks in deposits in New Zealand alone that's not getting enough interest. You know, like we're talking billions of dollars a year that's essentially excess margin that's going to Australia. That could pay for so many initiatives, many businesses being started. And a lot of people talk about how they don't like Australian banks in New Zealand. There's a lot of negative talk about banks and how they take advantage, but we do need to still see consumers actually start to vote with their dollars and start to genuinely look at alternatives. Because that's how you're going to see change.
Totally.
Is actually if they are then forced to compete with, because there's lots of products on the market, like for example, our high yield sweep account for USD, I think is paying like over 6 times the standard foreign deposit rate. Right. So there are products out there. There's tons of products out there that are competitive with the Australian bank, but there's still, oh well, I'm safer with the entity I know. So it's an interesting one, and it's something that we definitely face. But we're just going to keep pursuing. And it's definitely like I always advocate for like, hey, look at what it says in it. What is it in it? Like, you know, within a KiwiSaver, there are a bunch of companies. What do those companies do?
No, I think you guys, you know, play a really important role in helping, you know, the Joe Blogs kind of investor like myself navigate this stuff, right? Because it can get pretty complex, all that investing stuff. Trying to understand all that. And there's this temptation to go with these high returns here. And like you said, that feel a bit safer there. But I can't help but keep thinking, you know, as we're talking here, like, all of that stuff is irrelevant, in my opinion, when it comes to how much the planet's going to change, right? So how much is someone associating that they are invested in these, let's say, fossil fuels, and they're getting this return, but that's putting more greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, and so that the sea's going to rise as more ice melts and snow melts, and therefore now their property is going to get flooded every third year. Now they can't get insurance. How are they going to get a payout? Where they're stuck with a stranded asset of, you know, whatever. They're probably their biggest asset in their lives. And so I don't think there's enough of that kind of awareness. People are still just thinking money, put my money in here, make some more money. Cool, that's me. I'm going to have a better life. There's not enough thinking, okay, I've invested in that. That's opening a new coal mine. It's going to put millions of tons of more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That means that we're going to have much moist weather. I'm going to struggle to get the food that I like to eat, you know, and drink the wine I like, because it's all changing those weather patterns. And it's not done right. It probably blows a lot of people's minds. And so this point I'm trying to make is that there's this, yes, you taking direct money, you're going to need more and more money for every bit we make the planet in the future worse, right, to try and protect against the extremes that are coming. And so I don't think there's enough.
I think your point around, you know, the more volatility and uncertainty in any market, including an environmental market, if I just was to base it down to an environmental, like thinking about the weather as an environmental market, is the more volatility there is, right, the higher the cost to insure it.
Yeah.
Over the last couple of weeks, the market has been more volatile. You've seen assets go down, specifically risk assets, Bitcoin, and so forth. But you've also seen, stocks be quite volatile. And there's a thing called the volatility index, the VIX, and it's basically the price of volatility.
Right.
So it's the price to hedge your portfolio, broadly speaking, right?
Yeah.
And, had a couple of calls from clients saying, hey, I'm actually feeling a bit nervous. There's a lot of, there's people talking about Michael Burry and his short on the AI space. There's a lot more zeitgeist around the kind of AI situation and asset prices being very high.
Yeah.
So, and it was consistent, that view of that incremental person that has a view was consistent with the cost to insure your portfolio against bad things happening, because the VIX had doubled.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So the cost to insure your portfolio had essentially doubled, which basically means that it's a bit late. Typically in markets, once the market knows, obviously the price is reflected. And in that case, the volatility index had increased, which meant the price of hedging the portfolio had increased. Same goes for insurance. If you go to Florida now or certain places in the US, it's almost impossible to insure your property in certain areas. It's exactly that same market dynamic. And I mean, this is taking a little bit of a simplistic approach, but actually I think that just actually knowing, so we have a net worth tracking tool on the platform, the way you can aggregate all your assets, your KiwiSaver, your individual share accounts, your private assets, etc. And a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm in, I've got a KiwiSaver fund and I'm in Sharesies, right? Or I'm in Acuity, whatever. And they see it as different things. But actually, again, under the hood, it might be the same representation of the same trade. And I think, again, with these thematic-based things is the correlation between a renewable energy ETF and the S&P 500 might almost be exactly the same.
Right.
So you might think you're in a different trade or in a different investment, but you might be very correlated. Same with your property, right? So your property might be heavily correlated with the index, with equity indexes.
Right.
So there's a lot of, it would be really awesome to give people greater awareness around your view across your portfolio might be across 8 things, but it might be the same representation of the view. So it's kind of like, again, that looking under the hood a bit more and thinking from first principles, which is exciting. And it's an exciting opportunity because you should be thinking about all your assets in your portfolio, including your own personal business interests, as this balance sheet, like a business that you can then leverage and utilize to build towards your long-term goals, right? And that's kind of what we've focused on is how do you actually have an individual have a coherent strategy with how they want to build wealth for themselves and their household. And I think just like the ESG space, it's often considered too complex, too hard, and quite confronting.
Yeah, it is quite confronting. I think a lot of people just kind of too hard basket, just don't want to think about it. But I think to your point, like if people have that knowledge and just take some responsibility just to ask a few questions, like, am I invested in any fossil fuels, for example? And just, I don't really think that it's great. Some things like that, just don't have to do it all, but just a little bit of research, a little bit of thing. And I think then people like yourselves in this space to kind of bring that to the fore in a really kind of approachable, kind of digestible way, just so you know this, and this is not invested in fossil fuels, it was great, or this is invested in this startup that's doing this really great stuff. Because if I think a lot of people, and this goes back to just general consumers, I think they're just a bit lazy, and sometimes I feel for them, sometimes I don't. Like, we've got to remember this marketing beast that's around everyone, right? Buy this, do this, you need this to make yourself more attractive, this to make yourself look younger, you shouldn't look like that, you should look like this, you need this new thing, So people are inundated with that. And then again, investing, you need to invest your dollars, you need to try and get the best returns you possibly can, So you can understand why they kind of go,
well, it's noise versus signal, right?
Right.
And as we've got more information thrown at us, the noise has obviously increased. We always used to think about how to, as an investment platform especially, and especially with our genesis, where we had quite a trader-orientated name when we went to market, and we subsequently changed it because of that reason of behavioral. What are you encouraging? And your name actually might determine that in a sense.
Right. Yeah.
But one thing we had on the site was our objective was to reduce the noise.
Yeah, cool.
Because in investing, there's so much noise of, this amazing investment. And it's all around fear and greed. And in life now with AI, especially
Yeah.
with content, you know, all these content platforms, you just have a lot of noise. And, you know, being able to separate noise from signal is obviously what is actually just in life what kind of gives you better performance. So if I can reduce that in the business, there's so much noise in the business on a day-to-day, and you know that, right? How do you separate signal from noise? And that goes across everything in life.
It does. So I guess in summation, if people just take a little bit of responsibility, just ask a few questions, be a little bit curious about what they're investing in, I think that's going to go a long way.
Well, you can even use AI to do that. So you can be faced with a decision or a question, and then you could, if you can't think of the questions that you could ask. You could actually say to Perplexity or whatever it is, hey, you know, what would be, well, it's using like the inversion principle, right? So from like Munger and Elon Musk, like Charlie Munger talked about, like if you've got a business, think deeply about all the reasons why it would fail. Or why, you know, someone would want it to fail, or what someone might do to encourage it to fail. And then use that as a risk mitigation tool. Same thing, right? So you can go, oh, okay, I'm faced with this problem. Perplexity, what are 6 questions you would ask that would help me see where there could be issues or risks?
Okay. I might have to do that when I get home.
You know, I don't know. So the inversion principle is you're definitely inverting things and saying, okay, how like, you know, in jiu-jitsu, I compete in jiu-jitsu, you know, okay, well, from this position, what are all the ways I can get submitted? Okay. So then I know. It's the same with anything, right? So if I start Acuity, what are all the ways in which my competitors might try to discredit us or, you know, encourage us to fail?
We did do a SWOT analysis back in the day, you know, those things. This is a bit more advanced than that, isn't it? But I guess it's one of those things you have to do as a business owner, especially, right? You do have to, as my old business mentor would say, get in the helicopter and get up and sort of look down and see those kind of risks. And
for sure.
And
we should do that for our own household. You know? Like, really, and actually, as business owners and founders, you kind of have to disassociate yourself from your business in a sense, because your business is actually an asset that sits on your balance sheet as a household, and that is an asset that you need to basically nurture to obviously then produce as the household item. It's a separate entity. The asset has its own concerns, and you as a founder or operator, you have your own concerns, and this is a part of it. So it's I think a lot of what you do in the ESG space, like that we almost need our own personal ESG space to think about how do we want to do the right things and really vote with our dollars.
And there's a lot of that stuff out there, sort of people looking into their own impacts and stuff. But
awesome.
It's good. Hey, great chat, Charlie.
I feel like we could
much. Keep on talking, mate, for hours. There's so much there to unpack, but that was really cool.
Thanks for coming on the pod. I really appreciate it.
No, my pleasure.